I don't want to go to prison. No, don't worry. I'm not on the run. But the mere thought of spending a day behind bars certainly scares me into walking the line. Based on this quite sensible insight, inmates at a New Jersey prison developed a program that sends at-risk kids to prison for a day. The inmates then show and tell them in gruesome detail what life behind bars is like. The program spread all across the US, Europe, and Australia. It made intuitive sense. The kids were scared straight. The program was very effective, but not in the way you might be thinking now. Unfortunately, scared straight wasn't scaring anyone. Instead of producing fewer criminals, it was producing more. How do we know that? Researchers ran an experiment. A dozen experiments, to be exact. And instead of sending all of the kids to the prison field trip, they randomly selected half of them to stay at home. You already know this method from medical trials, where some receive the treatment and others receive a sugar pill. Using an experiment, we can then back out the effect of the program. The researchers found that participating in Scared Straight increased the chance of committing a crime by 13%. We don't know for sure why it didn't work, but the numbers don't lie. For every dollar spent on this program, it increases future crime costs by $200. So let's put this into perspective. If a government agency spends just $5,000 on this program, it essentially throws $1 million out of the window. So I'd love to say that this is a special story, a special example I found just for today. But it's not. When I asked my Twitter network for their favorite examples of spectacular policy failures, I got hundreds of answers in a couple of hours. And I'm sure if we went around the room today, we could easily double that list. There is one thing, though, that makes Scared Straight special, and that is, by now, we have clear evidence that it doesn't work. For most policies, though, we have no idea if they work or not, or if they're even causing harm. A recent study by the National Audit Office showed that in the UK, out of 108 major government programs, only 8% are assessed for their effectiveness. That is 400 billion pounds of British taxpayers' money spent without any evidence that it actually makes a difference. The US is even worse. Only 1% of government spending is evaluated for its effectiveness. Nowadays, no drug or treatment is allowed on the market without thorough clinical trials. But every day, people are sitting in offices and deciding on ideas and policies meant to change human behavior based on ideologies, anecdotes, common sense, and a gut feeling of individuals. Would you take a pill that hasn't been tested? Then why is this okay in all other aspects of our lives? Evidence-based medicine has transformed our medical practice. It's time for evidence-based policy to transform the way we make social and economic decisions. As a behavioral economist, I work with super motivated people every single day. People who are dedicated to improving the lives of their fellow citizens, customers, and employees. But when it comes to using experiments for evidence-based decision-making, I often feel like this guy. The main argument I usually hear about why we can't make decisions based on evidence is that it's too costly and too difficult. But really, how can it be more costly than spending millions of dollars on a program such as Scared Straight alone? So my mission for today is to prove to you that it's worth it to make decisions based on evidence, and that it's easier than you might think. You already know one sector that has understood how important experiments are for understanding and changing human behavior: the tech sector. The streaming platform Netflix is running thousands of experiments every single week, trying to get you more and more hooked on their product. And it works. So let's have a look at an experiment in action. I looked at my partner's Netflix account, and he got an ad for the Vikings. Then I want to see what I got. I also got an ad for the Vikings. But as you could tell, we usually have a hard time agreeing on what to watch. Netflix has understood that an organization that doesn't test is an organization that doesn't learn and isn't getting better. So I challenge you, next time you're sitting down for an evening of Netflix and chill, have a look and see if you can spot an experiment in action. But what if the same amount of effort that goes into finding the perfect movie trailer would go into improving our health, wealth, and happiness? What if, as a result of rigorous testing, policymakers could decide to cut spending on programs that don't work and move that money towards programs that have been proven that they do? Fortunately, this is what's starting to happen. Government agencies and consultancies are taking inspiration from science and the big tech companies and are applying rigorous testing to important policy choices. In the UK, 9 out of 10 people support organ donations, but fewer than 1 in 3 are actually signed up. This intention to action gap inspired the UK government to run an online experiment to see if they could get more people to sign up to the NHS organ donor registry. Website users were shown a number of different websites. Either they received a message which asked them to sign up to the registry, or they received a message telling them that if they would want an organ, if they needed it, they should sign up to help others. Or they received a social norm message saying that every day thousands of people who see this page decide to register. Or the same social norm message, but it was a picture of a group of people. Based on prior research they had done on monetary donations, all the smart people in the room would have bet on the picture and the social norm. But they would have been wrong. The picture version did not just perform worse than the winning idea, it even performed worse than the basic message they had before. If they had not tested, they would have missed out on an estimated 100,000 additional registrations. So which results are you missing out on? By now, I've trained hundreds of people in using behavioral science and experimentation, and I'm willing to bet that every one of you here has at least one personal or professional question that could benefit from running an experiment. I still remember my first experiment. I was a PhD student in Chicago at the time, absolutely no budget, but tons of motivation. One night, I was at a comedy club and I met a guy called Kevin. Turns out, Kevin was running a charitable bookstore and always interested in increasing donations. Next thing I know, we were running experiments on how to increase donations to the bookstore using just a couple of post-it notes and different messages on them. We found that, surprisingly, when we reminded people of their prior donation to the bookstore, they were more likely to donate. From then on, I was hooked. What other questions could we answer if we're just willing to test what works? And while I really enjoyed raising donations for a good cause, there was one challenge I was even more interested in. To protect our planet, we need to change our habits, and we need to change them fast. We can't afford to spend millions of dollars on ineffective programs. We need evidence, and we need it fast. How? By testing what works. One of the people I worked with was Åsa, a waitress at a restaurant in Sweden. Her restaurant was interested in lowering their climate impact, but, as many companies do, without paying anything or increasing the burden on their employees. So any experiment we were going to run needed to be simple, low cost, but informative. Something the restaurant would be able to implement if it turned out effective. The question we were interested in was, could placing vegetarian food at the top of the menu increase its demand? To test that, what we needed to do was to print two different menus. One was a vegetarian dish on top, and the other was the meat dish on top. We then randomly distributed these menus in different areas of the restaurant. And because the restaurant was already keeping track of who ordered what, we could then back out the effect of the menus. The experiment actually cost nothing to run because the menus needed to be printed anyway. But by using the power of randomization, we were able to back out the effect of the menu order. By the way, if you're curious about what we found, out of those who received the vegetarian dish on top of the menu, 15% ordered vegetarian. And out of those who received the meat dish on top, only 3% ordered the vegetarian dish. If Åsa, Kevin, and I can run experiments using just a printer and a couple of Post-it notes, so can you. So here are 4 simple steps to get you started today. 1, choose a question that's meaningful to you. Åsa and Kevin didn't set out to evaluate juvenile delinquency programs. They did experiments on questions that matter to their daily business. 2, make use of the data you already collect, whether this is website clicks, sales numbers, or book donations. Start with what you have. 3, randomize. You can flip a coin or use a random number generator. As long as you have a control group, you're good. 4, test if it worked. No? Well, then at least you can now spend your time and effort on other ideas. Without testing what works, a lot of time and money will continue to be spent on ideas that might or might not be effective. Whether you work in super innovative tech companies or more old school administration, we all have one thing in common. Our intuition is often wrong. Human behavior is complex, and what worked in one situation might not work in another. No behavioral scientist or management expert or TED speaker can perfectly predict whether an idea will work. Luckily, that doesn't matter. Not if you're willing to test what works. And the size of the prize is immense. Imagine trillions of dollars spent annually around the world by governments and organizations on ideas that actually work. We have the tools, we have the know-how, so now we just need the will and the discipline to test our way to a better future. Thank you.